Good morning, folks. A warm welcome to everybody. Today, we're learning the beautiful Parsha of Parshas Vayigash, which is when Joseph reunites with his brother and his brothers and his family after many years of estrangement. It was 21 years of separation of Joseph from his brothers. Remember, his brothers 2 weeks ago sold him into slavery when he was a teenager, about 17 years old. And he descends into Egypt. He descends into Egypt, a faraway place and a difficult land. And there, Joseph languishes in prison for about 12 years. Eventually, he rises to become the prime minister. That was last week's Torah portion. We're on page 279, by the way. And he leads Egypt through 7 years of plenty, followed by 2 years of famine. And that's where the story is set right now. So he's 12 years in prison, 9 years in leadership, 21 years of separation from his family. And now his brothers, in this elaborate story, his brothers now are coming to Egypt. Why they coming to Egypt? They coming to buy food because there's famine everywhere else. Only in Egypt there's food. And Joseph recognizes his brothers. They don't recognize him. So he sets up an elaborate test to see if they would treat his only full brother Benjamin the way that they treated him. Had they repented or not? So he sets up this elaborate plan where he frames them, where Benjamin is basically captured as a slave. And it's at the beginning of this week's Torah portion that Judah mans up and he says, I'm not letting you take the kid. I guaranteed his safety. You take me instead. I'm better than him in every respect. I'll be your slave forever. He is going back to his father. And at this point, when Joseph realizes that his brothers, the very brothers who sold him into slavery, have done a 180-degree turnaround, a full teshuvah, he breaks down with emotion. Let's take a look at this very, very emotional piece of Torah. Page 281. I always highly encourage you to read the Torah in English so you can know what's going on. It's very, very beautiful to be able to appreciate and understand it. Okay, so let's go to page 281. Let's go to verse 33. This is the end of Judah's soliloquy. So now, please let me, your servant, remain as a slave to my lord in the place of the lad, since in any case I'll make a better soldier or servant than he. And let the lad go back to Canaan with his brothers. For how can I go up to be there to my father if the lad is not with me? Let them not be forced to witness the calamity. Let me not be forced to witness the calamity that would befall my father. Joseph, now convinced that his brothers had truly repented of their former animosity towards him, understood that the time had come to disclose his identity to them. But Joseph could not bear to have his brothers shamed in the presence of all the people standing around him. So he exclaimed, have everyone leave my presence. Thus no man was left standing near Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. He broke out into loud weeping. The Egyptians, whom he had told to leave, heard it, and word spread until the servants and members of Pharaoh's household, that's Joseph's boss, they heard about it as well. Joseph said to his brothers in Hebrew, this is the first time he's talking to them in Hebrew. All of the negotiations that happened over the past year were negotiations that happened through an interpreter because they were convinced that he's an Egyptian. It was actually his own son, Menashe, who was the interpreter because Joseph spoke to his two sons in Hebrew in Egypt. So his own son, Menashe, was the interpreter. They didn't realize that they were talking to their nephew and Joseph was their brother. So this is the first time now when he starts talking to them in Hebrew, they were like, whoa. I am Joseph, whom you presume dead, because you were not able to find me. Being that I am alive, my father has surely not been able to stop grieving over me for the past 22 years, as he would have had he been mourning someone who really died. This is a very interesting Torah truth, world truth, that the Torah tells us that a person naturally decreases, slowly forgets about a person who died. Time heals the grief, the bereavement of a loved one. But if that person is not actually dead, then the person is never bereaved.
It's never comforted.
Is never comforted. The person is never comforted if the loved one is not actually deceased. For example, a hostage or someone that was lost. but didn't actually die. It's a nature that God implemented into the universe, that hamesim nishkachim min halev, the deceased are slowly forgotten from the heart. We move on from the deceased, but that's only if they're actually. That's what Joseph is saying. My father's surely not comforted over my loss because I didn't die. So there's no way that he actually got over it. Can my father indeed still be alive after such prolonged, intense mourning? If so, this is surely nothing short of a miracle. But his brothers could not bring themselves to answer him because they were disconcerted out of shame before him over what they had done to him. They shrank from his presence. They were like, OMG. Because he notices, he says, I'm Joseph. Is my father still alive? That's what he opens up with, right? So now, those are the opening words in Hebrew. Now they were just shaken. But now he realizes that they're having a hard time even believing him. They're in shock. So he's going to say to them something now that confirms his identity as Joseph, something that only he as Joseph could have known. What's that? He's going to tell them, you sold me as a slave. Joseph then said to his brothers in a softer, more entreating tone, please come close to me. And when they came closer, he showed them that he was circumcised like them. He said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery into Egypt. So now this is something that nobody else would have known. There was only 11 of them present when Joseph was sold as a slave. Only the 10 brothers, the sellers, and Joseph the sellee. Is that the word, sellee? The sellee, did you say that?
No.
I guess in English, people are normally sold.
Right.
So they don't have a word for the person who was sold.
The seller.
Or maybe the slave.
Seller, and then the seller. Oh, you're saying
the commodity.
The commodity that is
sold. But now do not be distressed. Now, this was a really difficult a revelation for the brothers. They were struggling right now. But now do not be distressed or reproach yourselves for having sold me into slavery here, since these are the kicker. These are the amazing, amazing words. Since it was ultimately in order for me to be able to provide for your needs that God sent me ahead of you. Whoa. Would you be able to say such words if you had 22 years of your life stolen from you?
No.
H, no?
H, no.
H, no. What does H mean? Harry? Harry?
Hell no. Pickle Harry.
Can you imagine what Joseph is saying here? He's saying, don't feel bad that you sold me into slavery.
It was part of the plan.
It was part of the plan.
It was God's plan.
That's what he's saying. Just look at these words. But do not be distressed or reproach yourselves for having sold me into slavery here, since it was ultimately in order for me to be able to provide for your needs that God sent me ahead of you. He says, there's a famine. The way that we're going to survive, our family, is because I'm here. That's why it's a good thing that you sold me into slavery. Don't feel bad. To me, Joseph is one of the most inspirational paradigms. Joseph is a person that I look up to in the most incredibly meaningful way. I find him to be so relatable through his sufferings and his trauma. Yet I find him to be so inspirational in his reaction. It's just amazing. Let's go a little further. For until now, for it has already been 2 years that there has been famine in the land, and there are still 5 more years to come in which there will be neither plowing nor reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to ensure that you survive in the land and to sustain you in an act of great deliverance. It's just unbelievable. Now we look at Joseph, and I want to draw your attention to focus on why God puts us into difficult circumstances. Have you ever experienced a difficult circumstance in your life?
So many times.
Yeah? Keith, you too?
Yes.
Do you know anybody that's never experienced a difficult circumstance in his life? Do you know anybody that never experienced difficulty? And if you don't think that they've experienced difficulty in their lives, then you just don't know them. Right?
I would agree.
Yeah. So what we're about to unlock over here is how today's Torah portion opens our eyes and gives us the courage to endure our challenges, our darkest nights, like Joseph did, by seeing the darkness through the way that he saw it. I'd like to draw your attention to the beginning of the story. And we're going to go backward to the beginning of the story. We've learned this together, but I do need to show it to you so that you can connect the dots. Hindsight is 20/20 vision. You can only connect the dots in retrospect. I want you to turn your attention, please, to the covenant of the parts. Here, page 85. Page 85. This is Abraham, Joseph's great-grandfather. Joseph's great-grandfather. This is a very enigmatic encounter. I'm going to do it quickly because we've already learned this before, but I do want to connect the dots. Page 85. Just at the top of the page, oh God, I replied to Abraham, by what sign can I see that I will take possession of the land? Give me a sign. So God said to him, I'm just reading the bold letters right now, bring for me 3 calves, 3 goats, 3 rams, a turtle dove, and a young dove. And he brought him all these, cut them in half, and placed each piece opposite its counterpart. 2 halves, right, of each. The birds, however, did not cut in half. Vultures swooped down on the carcasses, but Abram drove them away. See, he's got this little slaughter site. He's got these animals that are cut in half and on each side of the pathway. Then, as the sun was about to set, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and he was overwhelmed by a dark, ominous dread, prophetically foreboding the horrors of exile his descendants were destined to experience. And God says to Avram, explaining his dread, know for sure that your descendants will be foreigners in a land that is not theirs, and the people will enslave them and oppress them for 400 years. The sufferings of exile will purify and refine them so they will be able to sense and appreciate the holiness of the promised land. When they leave that land, the next verse, I will also execute judgment upon the nation upon whom they will serve, for having oppressed them cruelly. I will afflict them with 10 debilitating plagues, and after that they will leave with great wealth. And that's the end. After that, they will leave with great wealth. What's the significance here? Now, I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. If God offered you the option, Nikki, would you like to suffer for 400 years and you'll leave rich? Yes or no, right? 400 years, it's worth it. Apparently, it wasn't a yes or no question. No. It was a memo given to Abraham. No, heads up. That's all Abraham was given. That's all. It's interesting. Of course, we would answer no. But Abraham is told, listen, God says, I like you, Abraham. So just give me a heads up. 400 years, you're going to suffer, but it's going to end very, very well. You'll come out rich. And we've spoken about this before, that it didn't just mean rich, financially rich. We spoke about spiritually rich, in the sense that you've gone to a place where you fulfilled your spiritual destiny, the purpose for which your soul was sent to this world. Wherever you are never displaced. You are always dispatched.
You're there where
you're never displaced. You're always dispatched. You know what that means? Imagine a soldier in Gaza. He wakes up and he's like, I actually do not like this neighborhood. No, I'm out of here. And then he realizes, oh, actually, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Dispatched, is that sent to?
Sent to, dispatched.
It's
a strong word. Dispatch is what your mission is, right? You're not supposed to do interior design and get comfortable with the Sejaya neighborhood, right? You're supposed to do the mission and get out of there, right? This is the Jewish person's approach to difficult times, difficult people, and difficult places. God tells us, heads up, it's going to be a rough ride, but you will land on your feet and you will emerge with great wealth, right? So this is what Abraham tells. Abraham is telling this to, so God is telling this to Abraham, right?
And the why is not provided.
The what?
The why is not provided.
The why? No, he just tells them the what. He just tells them the what, but it's very helpful to have the what, by the way. It is very helpful. Imagine you got on a roller coaster and you had no idea where this ends. And you start being flung around like a sack of potatoes. Mm-hmm. And you're like, why did I pay for this? Why are they being so mean to me? I paid $127 entry to this park per person, right? And they're flinging me around like a sack of potatoes. They're abusing me. This is cruelty, right? But no, when you know that this is actually a thriller ride and that it actually ends well, and you see those people laughing, smiling, happy, those are the people getting off the ride. Oh, it's going to end okay. Fine. It gives you the strength to endure.
Otherwise, it's why me. So this
Yeah. So life is a roller coaster ride. You realize God is telling you it's a roller coaster ride. You're going to feel like a total schmata in the journey. But hold on tight.
It's gonna be better.
The ride is a designer, is an engineer here. It's past code of enforcement approval. It's okay. You'll get through this, and then you'll get off the ride. Why do you have to go through the ride? Because you got to pick up the pieces along the way. So now when Joseph faces his brothers, this is exactly what he's telling them. He's putting the pieces together. Let's go back to Joseph on page 281. He says, tells his brothers, come close to me. I'm Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery into Egypt. Again, page 281, towards the bottom, it's verse number 5. But now do not be distressed or reproach yourselves for having sold me into slavery here, since it was ultimately in order for me to be able to provide for your needs that God sent me ahead of you. He's referencing, he says, you remember Zaidi, Abraham, great-grandfather? We were told that we were going to suffer. By the way, the 400 years hadn't happened yet.
No.
The 400 years were just getting started. They were like into year 100 here, or your year.
So he's not telling them the whole story yet.
No, but he's saying to them, remember the template.
Yeah.
The template is that after the night comes day. That's the template. Is that after struggle comes success. This is what he's telling them. Abraham heard this, the first Jew heard this when he was getting started on his mission. God says to him, to be a Jew means that you're going to suffer. That's what God told Abraham. Think about it. So when somebody says, why would God treat his people like this? I think you have a mistaken presumption in your question. The question is based on a false human premise. The premise of your question is that if I'm chosen, it means you're going to be nice to me. Not true. God says you're chosen, and that's why I'm going to put you through the ringer.
Thanks a lot.
You're chosen for the ringer.
Thanks a lot, God.
Okay. By the way, there was no opt-out clause. Okay? There was no opt-out clause. Think about it, right? So we have to redefine the question. Why the Holocaust? Why this? Why October 7th? We don't understand these things. God never told us why, but he just told us that they're going to happen. And he told us that we're going to outlive our enemies. Now, has that happened, that part? Have we outlived our enemies?
So far.
Every single one of our enemies we've outlived. Right? We've outlived. So that part we know is true. We also know the part that we're going to have to suffer. That part is also true. So everything seems to be working out according to the plan. I mean, we don't agree with the plan. We'd love to have an amendment to the plan,
Well,
but we don't have a seat on that committee.
What year are we into of the 400 years? I'd like to know.
I have answered that question in other places, and I'll remind you that the Torah tells us that Mashiach, the great light, has to happen by the cosmic Shabbat. For God, one day is 1,000 human years. That's what it says in the Torah. 1,000 human years is one day for God, right? Therefore, at the end of the year 1,000, the end of the first millennium since creation, was the end of Sunday. The end of the second millennium is the end of Monday. The end of the third millennium is the end of Tuesday. What year are we in right now? 5,784 since creation. That means we are at the very, very, very end of daylight on Friday night, Friday afternoon. That's where we are in the cosmic calculation of God's clock. So that means Mashiach has to come like now. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's pretty awesome stuff. So I want to just wrap this all up here by saying, folks, that when Joseph tells his brothers that I came here to provide for you, he means on a physical level, I'm here to provide for you. But not only that, but also on a spiritual level. He's invoking Abraham's treaty of the covenant of the parts. And he says, look, we're here on a mission, so get comfortable. We're not displaced, we're dispatched, right? And he even says it further. He says, look at these amazing words. You can look at it in the Hebrew 1 second. Here, verse number 5. Here, verse number 5. Take a look at verse number 5 again. Just look at this amazing verse. But now, do not be distressed or reproach yourselves for having sold me into slavery here. Keyword, sold. It's not you that sold me, since it was in order to provide your needs that God has sent me ahead of you. I am not sold, I am sent. I am not sold, I am sent. Wow. I'm not sold. I'm not a victim. I am sent. I'm empowered. I'm strong. I'm not weak. I want you to think about this in terms of your financial struggle, or your relationship struggle, or your medical struggle, or your international humanitarian struggle, your struggle for Israel or against anti-Semitism. I want you to think about this in terms of your internal neurodivergent, your personal neurodivergent struggle. You know what neurodivergent means? It means abyssal meshuggah.
Okay, that sounds good.
Whether your problem is ADHD, OCD, addiction, codependency, neurotic, psychotic, chaotic, whatever's your problem.
Neurodivergent sounds much
Well,
better.
it sounds much safer.
That's not a
It's a new word.
whatever your problem is, you can walk around cursing your luck. Why did that person have to do that to me? Why did that person have to cause that damage to me? But can you be like Joseph, who says, I'm not your victim. I'm sent. This is unbelievably empowering stuff. To be able to have the courage to face your fears and to say, this is not my problem. This is my assignment. This is Joseph, and we need a whole week to meditate on this guy, to read the Torah portion and to think about him and to apply his issues, because Joseph, I am Joseph. Ani Yosef. You are Joseph. You got to be the Joseph. You just didn't realize it. So don't be a slave. Don't be a victim. Don't be weak. Don't cower. Be sent. Be strong. Stand up to the mission that God has entrusted you with. The mission to illuminate a place that nobody else can illuminate. That is your purpose. Rocco's mom, the only happy people I know are the people I don't know. Yep, that's right. The fakers. Okay, good. Anyways, a warm message on a very cold day. Any questions?
No questions.
We left with a huge question mark.
No questions.
But the question mark that we left with is that why is not really an option. We just know that. Changes the question.
Actually, it's a big answer. Because basically what you're saying is that all this disaster we're undergoing right now is not the early stages of World War III or the next Holocaust. In fact, it's just the beginning of Mashiach.
You know, it's so interesting. You just made me realize, Andy, is that the Greeks were fighting the Jews on Hanukkah, right? What is the classic Greek narrative, the Greek entertainment? It's called the Greek tragedy, right? It's pathetic. Why is it pathetic? Pathetic means sad. The word pathetic means sad because the Greek tragedy always ends in sadness. Somebody dies, unrequited love, right? This is how the Greek tragedy ends. It always ends badly. This is the classic storyline of the Greek entertainment, right? But in Judaism, the Jews fought the Greeks. We refused to accept this. Because in Torah, we know that the story ends well. We know in Torah that everything will be good in the end, and if it's not good,
It's not the end.
it's not the end. This is a massive conflict, a massive conflict of worldview that differs between the Greek worldview and the Jewish worldview. So, Andy, when you look at the current events and you say, oh, this must be the beginning of World War III, Torah says, no, this is the beginning of Mashiach. All right? Beautiful thought there. Thank you, guys. Check off.
I can tell you people I haven't spoken to